my list of favorite books for residency applicants that I think you absolutely should read, reread, and reread until it becomes a part of your life. Because these books not only are going to help you with your residency application, which is really a very small part of the process, but more importantly, they're gonna make you a better doctor. You're at a stage where medical school is pretty much over. The mentality of, oh, I want to get into medical school, all that is all over. Now you're getting to the reality of becoming a doctor. In order for you to be a fantastic doctor, I believe you need to have several key characteristics, key qualities, key skills that are going to make you very dangerous in a very good way as a doctor. So first, maybe I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Behrouz Moemeni. I'm the CEO and founder here at BMO. I'm joined with Zhenya, who is our content manager at BMO. Now, Zhenya, I think before we go right into the books, and we got 8 books to share, and it's really interesting because about half of them are from the same author that I think every medical doctor needs to know about and read about him, about anything he does. But let's go one step back. What are the qualities that are so important that if a doctor doesn't possess those qualities, no matter how much anatomy they know, no matter how much pathology they know, no matter how much science they know, just doesn't really matter, right? And of course, if you're watching this, we're not talking about the actual field-specific knowledge. You're going to get that into residency, right? You got that into medical school, you're going to get that into residency. So, Zhenya, what are some of your top choices the minute you think of a fantastic doctor?
So the first thing that you need to know is that the residency program directors, they look at communication skills first and foremost. In fact, your interactions with the team when you meet them in interview are the #1 reason you're ranked. So your interactions with the program director and the team is the #1 thing that will affect your ranking.
It's, and when we do mock, let's say, interviews with our residency applicants, one of the major things we normally talk about is it's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it. Not what you say, how you say it. Yes, what you say is also important. You can't say dumb stuff, obviously, or be racist, or I don't know, be a bigot, or obviously. But you could say the same thing in a different way, and it could mean a totally different thing. So your communication skills is absolutely key, and you'll be surprised how many doctors who've been a doctor for like 30, 40 years. So the previous generation, some of them have zero communication skills. Why? Because they didn't care that much at the time. And the role of a doctor was a little bit different. The role of a doctor was mostly an expert, but it's not. Over time, it became clear that a doctor is a teacher. So, as in, you cannot tell a patient what to do. You could only educate them. But then the patient could be a 2-year-old kid. A patient could be a 65-year-old Nobel Prize winner in physics. A patient could be someone who is homeless, So that's a major thing to do. For that, obviously you get practice. That's one. Nothing's going to beat practice. No book is ever going to give you anything beyond actual experience. But one experience you get is obviously your reading comprehension, which is through literally any book. For that, we're not going to recommend you a specific book because any sort of a book you read is good for your reading comprehension. Now, let's think about some of the other major sort of skills a doctor must have. The other one that comes to my mind is the ability to be able to read emotions and manage those emotions of a patient. This could be anger, sadness, happiness, joy, feeling that they have absolutely no reason to live mean, depending on what specialty you go into, you may encounter someone like that. So that's another major one, is being socially aware. The next one is being culturally aware. That's very important. Again, you cannot have your own pre-made or preconceived sort of notions of different cultures, races, socioeconomic background influence how you conduct yourself as a doctor. Not only that, you're not going to be a good doctor. Sooner or later, you're going to lose your license. It's the end of it. People have no tolerance for this anymore. Even if your program director is racist, him or herself, they're still not going to tolerate it because it's just bad. It's just really bad for business. It's bad for the profession. So you shouldn't obviously do it just because it's bad for the profession or for a job. You should just do it because it's the right thing to do, obviously. The other major component that, or the skill, I should say, that really helps a doctor is the ability to solve puzzles without having all the pieces of the puzzles, right? That's essentially what you're going to be doing. People come in, present a set of symptoms, and you have a very limited number of tools in your possession. Yes, you've gone through all this training in med school. Yes, you're going to go through your specialty. But even then, even after you've been 20 years practicing, you still have a very limited number of tools. Or in our case, if you're solving a puzzle, pieces in the puzzle. So what do you normally have? You have the person in front of you, whatever they're telling you. You could, request many different tests to see what's going on with their body, with their symptoms, with their biochemistry, with their anatomy, with their physiology, with any sort of other symptoms you have. You could write up a test. But human body is so complex. It's just that's just not how things work. This is why we still don't have cure for majority of most complex diseases. Like there's nothing. You could mask the symptoms, and normally as you mask a symptom, another symptom pops up, so then you gotta mask that, and then you go into a vicious cycle, because that's just not how the body works. That's not how the body interacts with the environment. And understanding genes and environment is just so complex. There is very few characteristics in the body where one gene determines the full outcome of any sort of an outcome in the body. As a result of that, multiple genes and also genes interacting with the environment and the diet and the air and whatever the person is consuming and their emotions, which again causes changes, hormonal changes in the body, which then affect everything else. It's just incredibly hard. So to be a good doctor, it's hard. Most doctors are not good doctors. That's the end of it. Just like any other field, anything else in life, the rule of 80-20 applies. Right now in your class, I can guarantee you 80% of your class are pretty bad doctors to be. They're probably pretty terrible in med school. They're going to be terrible in residency, and they will be terrible doctors. 20%, in fact, it's not even 20%, 5% are going to be fantastic doctors. They're going to figure out all of these things. And then with experience, it adds fuel to the fire. And the last skill you need before we go into the books, which is incredibly important, that majority of you watching this do not have, unfortunately, and hopefully this will be a wake-up call for you to go and do something else, is being intrinsically motivated. If you're intrinsically motivated and you actually like becoming a doctor, going through your practice, like literally you will not sleep because you want to learn more and become better. The act of learning this thing becomes a part of the joy of the process. You just cannot fake that. If you're there to get a yacht, you're going to get bored or tired or burn out or quit as soon as you start your residency, or if the residency is a little bit of a tough one, or you're going to go to I'm going to go to an easy residency. So again, but that's the reality. So intrinsic motivation, I don't think we could do anything about that.
Zhenya? I think I did want to add something. Yeah, it's not as Behrouz said, 80% of your classmates are not going to be bad doctors because they're stupid, or they are, it's because
No,
they don't care as much. They
they
just
don't.
don't have that intrinsic motivation to investigate the diagnosis or the disease or the patient. And that's what Behrouz was talking about. So
I should also clarify that, when you don't have that motivation, when you don't have that discipline and the desire to want to learn more, you're not going to get better. You're going to be a medical student for the rest of your life. You'll be practicing for 4 years, but you know as much as the best medical student there was. So because there is no other way to learn. Like I always give, example of, when somebody says, hey, I want to be really good at BMO, I'd be like, okay, well, how much are you willing to sacrifice in your life to get good at this one thing? I give Michael Jordan as an example. So he was dribbling 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. Are you willing to do that? He didn't watch Netflix. He didn't watch YouTube. He didn't have a lot of friends. He didn't, go, fancy travel. He didn't buy a yacht. He didn't do that, at least not during the peak of his career. Maybe he did that later. Maybe he did that in between breaks in his career, but that's not what he focused on. At least if you go look at his schedule, you'll be like, makes sense. Well, he did that much work. When I look at average basketball players, well, they did not do that much work. It's just simple as that. That's the first thing. Main ingredient is like, are you intrinsically motivated? Because if you are, you're going to find this whole process a lot more enjoyable. And as a result, you'll do more of it and you'll do more than anybody else, which means you're going to become better than anybody else. There is no other formula. That's it. The end, essentially, for any skill. So with that being said, let's go through some of the books that are absolutely my favorite that are going to help with these topics. One of my favorite authors that I think every medical student, medical resident, medical doctor must be familiar with and read religiously is Nassim Nicholas Taleb. So he's written, I think, 4 or 5 books that I really like. I'm going to recommend 4 that are really important for being a future medical doctor. One is this book, and this is Skin in the Game. Why is this important to understand? And what does he talk about? The first book, or the Skin in the Game, is so important because the concept is that if you have any sort of an activity or a profession or any sort of an endeavor where 2 parties, the provider and the person who receives the service, whatever that is, it could be for-profit, non-profit, it could be a doctor, patient, whatever. If they both have skin in the game, more likely of a chance that this will succeed. So for example, if you're a medical doctor, malpractice, you get sued and you lose the license, we got some skin in the game. But if you're a medical doctor, you get sued, you malpractice, you get sued, nothing happens to you, oh my God, no skin in the game. In the case of your selection committee member, for example, you're applying to residency now, that committee member, if they select the arrogant asshole person to become a doctor and reject the person who was a really nice person, but maybe they couldn't have a good communication, they were nervous, they just reject that person, what happens to the selection committee member or members? Nothing. That's a system that has no skin in the game. That's why you have people becoming doctors that shouldn't really be versus others that get. So every time you have that sort of imbalance where both parties do not have skin in the game, it's just not a good idea. This is a very important concept to understand for medical doctors, because depending on where you go, make sure you always go somewhere where you got skin in the game or you're not going to perform well. You can guarantee that. And you're going to be the same thing. And usually it's a bureaucracy that keeps you in its place. It's actually not a good thing to do for yourself either. So that was my first one. Second book I have is, again, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. I don't know if you guys can see because of that reflection. Fooled by Randomness. Why is this important? Well, again, I don't want to butcher the meat of these books. So you should read them. You should reread them. These are books you got to read a few times, by the way. You're not going to get it the first time. Not the entire concept and all the material he's trying to convey. This is a concept where majority of people, especially people who are highly educated, don't understand probability and statistics. And sometimes they see a small, sort of a small sample or a small effect, and they assume that is the reality for a larger population or for the entire population. For example, let's say in the case of medicine, epidemiology is something that comes in mind. Or for example, if someone's doing clinical research and they make very profound conclusions based on a small sample, or it could even be a large sample, but the person's inability to understand noise versus signal. Why? Because they have not studied probability nor statistics, and they really don't understand which method of statistical analysis to use for what purpose. So that's very important. I'm not going to go into this, but if you don't know statistics and probability, you're never going to be a good doctor. I don't care how good you are in everything else, you're never going to be a good doctor because you don't have a basic understanding of how large numbers work and how, you know, the concepts in a research paper should be interpreted. The next one is, again, from Nassim Nicholas Taleb, AntiFragile. So this is the concept of fragile. So let's say you got a glass and it just breaks, and that's an example of something that's fragile. That's, you cannot even put it back, it's over, right? Then you got things that are robust. So now let's say you have something that's made of reinforced steel. You could still destroy it, but it's kind of robust. It's, you know, it's not as fragile as a glass. Then you got anti-fragile. Anti-fragile systems get better with stress as long as the stress doesn't kill them. So, example, which is important for doctors. That's why this is the concept that I'm talking about. You need to understand how the body is designed to be anti-fragile, and stress is good. Exercise. Exercise normally makes people stronger. It doesn't kill them. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. It's a very good example. So for example, heart rate adapts. The heart adapts to the amount of aerobic exercise you do. The muscles adapt to the amount of weight training you do. This is just, you know, some simple examples. He goes into this, he gives a lot of examples, and you need to understand this in the concept of medicine. It's so important. The other book I have here, this is now book number 4, again from the same author, and this is our last one from the same author, The Concept of Black Swan. This is understanding, having an understanding that there are events that you and I or anybody else cannot predict, but when they come about, they have an incredibly profound impact on essentially the field that is most impacted. This could be as large scale as the entire world. It could be as, you know, narrow as just a niche part of the population that's impacted. Now, the key here is that these are things that you cannot predict. So you cannot sit down and be like, oh, let me just predict. No, you cannot predict these. So you just have to make yourself ready for all these type of things that could possibly come about. And they could be both good or bad. You want to expose yourself to a lot of good. That's, in the case of medicine, experimentation. Research experimentation that doesn't harm people is the best thing you could do. And there's many different ways you could do that. On the other hand, for example, in case of medicine, let's say anything that could essentially harm the body, and someone's medical condition. Let's say, for example, smoking cigarettes. I mean, that's not really a black swan because we now know that it's so terrible. But how do you prepare for that? Some people say, or like drinking alcohol. There are a lot of people don't understand the concept that they're like, oh, you know what? Just drink in moderation. This is not how it works. You don't drink at all. You don't smoke at all because you don't know when you're gonna get cancer, right? It's the unknown, and obviously the chance of the unknown, whether it's positive or negative, increases as the frequency increases. Again, the concept of black swan, I didn't really explain it in this video. You should read this book. It's fantastic to understand how it relates. The interesting thing is Nassim Nicholas Taleb does talk about the medical field in, I think, almost all of these 4 books. So you're going to make the connections on your own. Now, if you're now thinking about residency applications, what are some of the things you need to know? By the way, these will also help you with the residency application, because having these kind of knowledge going to a residency interview, it's just going to help you out. You're going to be a lot more knowledgeable than somebody who doesn't understand that. One of the books you have, Zhenya, is for, it may help, the one that you want to say, it may help with the residency application or personal statement, etc. But I think as a doctor as well.
Yes, I think this book actually helps everybody at any stage of their career, whatever they do. I love this book, Strunk and White, The Elements of Style. Of course, if you are preparing your applications, this is key because nothing will get your application chucked away immediately more than mistakes, errors, grammatical, syntax errors. If director has to reread one sentence twice, that means it's a bad sentence. You have to, your application components have to be perfect, and we're not exaggerating here. Like, they have to be near perfect. So in that regard, this book, it's fun, it's very accessible, and it will really help you with preparing a stellar written application, because really that's what will get you your interview eventually. So your written application must be so outstanding, so error-free, that you finally get that interview invite. So I would strongly suggest reading this, whether you're applying for medical school or residency or anywhere else. This is a key book to learn those little things that you might not be totally familiar with, like clauses, or when to use sort of possessive, when not to use certain things. It's really fun and accessible. So I strongly recommend that if you're preparing your residency application. And of course, once you start getting those things down, like written wise, even your speech will improve, because you will know exactly how to formulate, articulate a really great sentence in your interview, and that will impress the directors even more. As I already mentioned, your communication skills are the #1 thing that program directors are looking at. So I strongly recommend
100%.
Elements of Style.
I think, even as a medical doctor, if you're making like weird mistakes in your writing or, any sort of form of communication, you're going to lose credibility very quickly. It's the fastest way patients will listen to you, because you lost your credibility. It doesn't matter. You got an MD. Who cares if you can't spell things? You don't have good grammar. People always talk about bad handwriting of doctors. It's not really bad handwriting. It's just because they're in a rush. They're trying to just get going. That makes sense. But bad grammar of doctors, I don't think anybody's ever going to be cool with that.
Absolutely. And what's more, not only your patients, but other people who are responsible for your patient's health can misunderstand you. This is a place where errors are really, really, they cost a lot, right? So communicating properly, written wise and verbally, is so important. So you need to work on that. If you think this is an area where you can improve, I strongly recommend that you pick up that Elements of Style.
Very nice short book as well. Now the other 3 other books we have. So how many did we give you so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. we have three more. One of them is, this is for residency personal statements. So if you want to get an understanding of how to structure your personal statement and make sure it grabs attention within the first 10 seconds, because that's all that matters. Like if you either grab attention or you're just tossed into just a pile of rejection, you should look into our book. It's BMO's Ultimate Guide to Residency Personal Statements. I don't have a copy of that to show you, but that's on Amazon. I think the Kindle is like 99 cents. We're not trying to make any money from the book or these videos. This is just pure content. But I think you will really enjoy it because we go through the process of creating those statements, and then we give you some examples. And that's what allows you to understand the concepts in real life of previous past successful examples. For the residency interview, I do have a copy of this. This is BMO's Ultimate Guide to Residency Interviews. This one goes again into how you should prepare, different formats of interviews. Then we go into, again, a lot of sample question and answers, so you understand the concepts we're teaching. And the goal of the book is to teach you how to answer literally any interview question right on the spot and sound smart, fluent, someone who's got good, judgment, someone who can make pretty good logical arguments. And you're going to learn all of that from that book because we focus on the learning. We're not going to teach you how to memorize sample questions. Yes, we have lots of sample questions, but that's not going to guarantee you're going to get those exact questions. Now, book number 8 is something that may interest you as well because you're going through this process. It's a book from yours truly. This is 14 Rules for Admission Screening in Higher Ed. Why am I asking you to read this when your program director should have read this? And hopefully he has. A lot of universities have picked this up in admissions office, whether it's for medical school admissions or residency selection committee. I'm asking you to read this because I want you to start to think about the needs of the program director. So being on the other side, having empathy for the person selecting you is going to allow you to do a lot better in the process. It's also going to highlight the flaws in the process and hopefully what will be done in the future. And maybe you will find some interest once you get into the system. You will actually have an opportunity because you're going to be acutely aware. Once you read this book, you're going to be acutely aware, even during your interview or when you're doing your application, that some of the parts of the admissions and the selection process are just complete BS. But once you understand that, if you find any interest, later on, you're going to have influence to come back and make changes that are going to help future applicants go through this process. I think those were the books that I would recommend. And I bet you didn't think I was going to recommend any of these. I know a lot of people go on, a podcast or a YouTube video and they recommend the usual stuff, When Breath Becomes Air, for example. It's a fantastic book, but you've already read that. I'm trying to see if I can give you my twist on how I would believe you could make a fantastic doctor based on my experience interacting with other doctors, based on what I believe is important in a medical doctor. And I'm not a medical doctor. I have a PhD in immunology, so I have a different perspective than what you're used to. And I definitely didn't want to give you what you've heard. So I'm hoping this is going to allow you to get to that next level, because our goal, Zhenya, essentially is for people who watch our podcast or listen to our podcast or watch the videos for the podcast or consume our content in any way, is not how do I learn this to X. That's not our reasoning. The reasoning is how do I become the absolute best doctor, the absolute best lawyer, the absolute best business person. That is the idea. Those are the type of people we attract. So it is a little bit different. It's our advanced material we give you. We're not going to give you just like a little bit of, how to fake your way into becoming a medical doctor. There's plenty of other channels that talk about that. Not interested in that. It's just kind of boring, and it just makes life so boring, because as soon as you cheat your way into something, then what? Now what are you going to do with your life? How many Netflix shows are you going to watch? Right?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note the books that you brought up specifically with, Residency Personal Statement or Residency Interview by BMO. It's, it's exactly what you said. We're not tricking you into memorizing anything. Like you will actually learn strategies that you can use after you complete your residency statement or after you ace your interview. These are very often overlooked skills that, we focus more on the knowledge of medical doctors or, their ability to heal. Those are, of course, essential. But the other skills that you will need and which the program directors focus on, you need to practice those too, and you need to habituate them in yourselves. So those are really important, and these are the books that Behrouz and I kind of suggest to you. It's about building skills that you can use forever. So I would say that these are really important.
Well, that was it for us. Another episode. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and share it with a friend. If you have any questions, ask us in the comment section, and hopefully we'll talk to you during the next episode. Thanks so much. Bye.